Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of One Bottle Each. I'm joined by my guest Frank Morgan. Frank and I have known each other about a dozen years. We met at one of the early wine bloggers conferences, possibly even the very first one. Frank is the founder of Drink What You Like, a well-known wine blog based in Virginia. He also founded Virginia Wine Chat and writes for several print publications. Hi Frank.
Gabe, hey, good afternoon. How are you? Thanks for having me on the inaugural podcast.
You were the first person I thought of that I would want on the first episode. It just made all the sense in the world to me.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So tell us a bit more about, your founding Drink What You Like and the other endeavors you're involved with as it relates to wine and your love for Virginia in particular.
Yeah, so I think you're right. We did meet at the initial wine bloggers conference. I don't think that they don't use that name any longer, but it was in Sonoma. I think it was. I remember meeting then. We've stayed in touch, and I started Drink What You Like around that time. I was traveling a lot, and just wanted a way to chronicle, my travels. And I will say that Drink What You Like. I believe people should, but it's not like this hardcore philosophy. I think there are some limits. Bad wine is bad wine. But I just started that to chronicle my travels. I was doing a lot of that, and friends said, "Hey, what are you up to? What wine should be trying?" So someone suggested starting a blog. I did that. After a few years, a local magazine editor approached me and said, "Hey, we need somebody to edit some articles for every issue." It was a bi-monthly publication at the time. I said, "Hey, that'd be great. I'll do that." And that magazine, like a lot of print magazines, it lasted 5 years, but it folded, and then there was a spinoff, and I worked with that magazine, and now I write for the local newspaper about wine, principally about Virginia wines, but I do coverage right now. I'm working on a piece for the wines of Oregon, but a lot of what I focus on is Virginia because that's where I live. I live here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I spend prior to the current shutdown, I spent a lot of time just roaming the wine routes of Virginia and meeting the wineries and tasting the wine. So yeah.
What was your first? I mean, living in Virginia, were you drinking Virginia wine as soon as wine became an interest, or did you have to sort of grow into the love of Virginia wine over time as you got introduced to more and more of it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I first found wine kind of by accident. I was working on a long-term project in the Bay Area, and a colleague said, "Hey, you're doing this weekly commute back and forth to Virginia. Why don't you come up to this place called Sonoma with us?" Okay, that sounds great. We'll visit some wineries. I thought, well, that sure beats going back, taking the cross-country flight over the weekend. So I stayed. I think it was 2006. It was the first time I visited a winery, and it was Gunlock Bundschuh. And so, only drink wine occasionally, and then I just kind of fell in love with that. The just roaming around the routes of Napa and Sonoma, and I did that every other weekend for about 6 months, just roaming around Napa and Sonoma. If I saw a tasting room sign, I would pull in, knew nothing but asked a lot of questions. And after that project, I went to Oregon and worked on a project there, and then found Oregon Pinot Noir. And I still today love the wine Chardonnay and Pinot from Oregon. So, it wasn't until after I went to spend all that time in Napa and Sonoma and then in Oregon that I came to Virginia. And, occasionally I would go with friends. We'd rent a table at a festival. But it was only after finding wines in California and Oregon that I started, visiting wineries in Virginia. And then because it's so close, right? I was no longer on that project in California or Oregon. So, it just proximity. I was visiting lots of wineries in Charlottesville.
That's great because I do think that a lot of people who love wine don't necessarily always take advantage of what's close to them if they're not in one of the more famous wine regions of the world, let's say, or close to.
Yeah, Gabe, it really is. You have this whole, restaurants. Of course, pre-pandemic was there. A lot of the messaging was about locally sourced farmers, locally sourced produce, but oftentimes they would overlook. A lot of the restaurants would overlook local wine, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's the chicken and the egg, argument. Do consumers have to request it first, and then the restaurants provide it, or the restaurants need to provide it to educate consumers? So But really, I think a lot of times, wine drinkers will overlook the gems of their local region. And Virginia's like a lot of others. There's some really fantastic wines here. But like every other region, there's some really not fantastic wines. And my friends who do not like Virginia wine on the whole have generally tasted the not so good local wines.
Sure, that makes complete sense. I'm assuming that the wine you chose for us today is one of the good Virginia wines.
It is, of course. And so what I've selected is the 2018 Petit Manseng from Early Mountain Vineyards. Early Mountain is based in Madison, so that's about 30 minutes northwest of Charlottesville. This is an important winery because in 2011, the winery was in distress, financial distress. And Gene Case, you may remember AOL, America Online. We always got those discs in magazines and in the mail. You've
Certainly.
got mail. Well, Gene Case from AOL purchased Early Mountain. It was called something else then, and they renamed it Early Mountain. And invested a lot, made a huge investment, not only in Early Mountain vineyards, but also the industry itself. So they upgraded their facilities, upgraded the winery, brought in a new winemaker, Ben Jordan, a new vineyard manager, Maya Hood White. They are like a rock star super team, dynamic duo. And also set up a Best of Virginia program. So when you go into the tasting room, you could taste up to a dozen wines from other wineries or wines from a dozen other wineries, and they would donate or contribute some of that money back into the Virginia wine industry. And I'll tell you, in 9 years, they've made leaps in quality. So I picked out the 2018 Petit Manseng. 2018 was not a fantastic year in Virginia. 2017 was great and hot. 2019 was excellent. 2018 was a little bit wet in some areas. But I picked Petit Manseng because it's an interesting conversational wine. It's named for, it's a very, if you've ever seen them on the cluster, it's a very small, thick-skinned berries, naturally high acidity, just crackling with energy. And I picked this because it's not widely grown. This grape's not widely grown outside the Jurançon region of France, where it's from. And so I just wanted to present this to you and say, hey, look, this is a cool conversational wine. It's really delicious. And I would love to know what you think.
Well, I like it. I've only had, I'll be honest, I've only had a handful of Petit Mansengs. The first one I had that I'm aware I had was also one that I was participating in one of your Virginia wine chats.
Yeah.
I believe it was the one from Michael Shaps.
Right. Yes, that's right. So Virginia Wine Chat, I forgot to mention that I started that in 2013 as a monthly virtual tasting series. So 7 years ago, I started Virginia Wine Chat long before. Now the virtual tastings are ubiquitous now, right? They're everywhere. But I was doing it, 7 years ago, and have done it, hosted a Virginia Wine Chat virtually every month via video. For 7 years, except we generally take June, July, August off because shipping is in my opinion not a good thing to ship during the Virginia summers of 100 degrees or 98 degrees and 100% humidity.
Yeah, anywhere in the country you can get those pockets of heat in the summer. It's definitely dangerous to ship wine then if you can avoid it.
Yeah. So getting back to this wine, I love Petit Manseng. I think it's in the Jurançon, you'll find most of them are sweet, sticky wines, which are really unctuous and delicious. But this is dry, or there's probably a little hint of residual sugar there. But I dig this wine because Maya and Ben are really, in my opinion, dialed in. I mean, there's some other fantastic producers in Virginia making 100% dry varietal Petit Manseng. Like Michael Shaps that you mentioned, he's probably the most notable. He makes a fantastic dry Petit Manseng. Horton Vineyards, last year, they won the Governor's Cup with their 2016 Petit Manseng. You've got Williamsburg Winery. And then Matufino at King Family Vineyard makes a really cool, like a skin contact Petit Manseng. But I'll say that this has a splash, I think 3% of Sauvignon Blanc and 2% of Chardonnay. But generally, it's easy to find 100% Petit Manseng dry here.
Yeah, I think this wine is lovely. First of all, what I really dig about it is the acid, but beyond the acid, there's a really nice textural element and mouthfeel, particularly towards the back end. And those are things for me. The more wine I taste over the years, texture, mouthfeel, and acid are three things that speak to me, more prominently than they did, a decade ago, certainly.
Yep. Yep.
And
So yeah, Gabe, this wine spent 15 months on lees. And here's something unique for this grape or this wine. So it was 15 months on lees. So that's where I think you're getting some of that texture. Not everyone ages Petit Manseng that long on the lees, but so it was aged and fermented in a combination of concrete and large acacia barrels in big foudre or oak puncheons. So it was aged in all of those, but most interesting is the acacia barrel.
yeah, and those are all sort of vessels that do lend to texture.
Yep. Yep.
More than traditional, let's say French, American, or Slovenian oak wood.
Right.
Yeah, no, lovely wine.
Yeah, I dig this a lot. I like that there's like an orange rind or something, and maybe on the end there's little hints of a nuttiness, like an almond or something. But gosh, I mean, if you have seafood or oysters, Petit Manseng is just a lovely complement to those, and it's an interesting grape. And I think that right now there's just not a lot planted around the world outside of the Jurançon, but here in Virginia there's about 65 bearing acres right now in the Commonwealth. And there's between 20 and 25 non-bearing acres. So that tells you that a lot more is being planted, right? A lot more vineyard space is being designated to Petit Manseng. One is because, I don't know if there are grapes that are ideally suited to the hot, humid climate here in Virginia. Now we're in hurricane season, so we get a lot of precipitation usually around this time of the year. Plus we have, just crazy humidity. But to the extent there is a grape that, is reasonably well suited, this one, because it's small berries, looser clusters, thicker skins, it generally stands up reasonably well to the humidity here.
That's great. I think that a couple things. One, I also think this would do well with strong cheeses, particularly strong soft cheeses. And do you think that Petit Manseng then will become sort of one of the signature white grapes of Virginia with time? Do you think it's probably too early to tell, but can you think that maybe it's headed that way at some point?
I think in some people's mind, yes. I think Virginia right now, I mean, the modern Virginia wine industry really is about 4 decades old. So 76, when Yanni Zunin came from Italy and bought the property north of Charlottesville called Barboursville. Now it's Barboursville Vineyard. Did that in 76, planted the vineyards there. That really helped kick off the modern Virginia wine industry. So we're looking at 4 decades. And I just think that, wine growers, across the state, like in a lot of regions, right, they're still trying to find the sites that are working well with certain varieties. And of course, there are some varieties like Petit Manseng that are thriving, here in the Commonwealth. I don't know if it's going to become a signature. I just think right now Virginia is too young for that. And there's too much more to learn from vineyard sites. But to me, it is something that is a great way to introduce, wine enthusiasts and consumers to Virginia.
That makes all the sense in the world to me. I think it's easier to get somebody to try a grape they've never tried, perhaps, from a region they're unfamiliar with. Then there's not the obvious comparables, where if you get a grape that they know from somewhere else that it's going to be completely different in this new region, they don't have that level of expectation. So it's a complete level of surprise, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. And on the subject of signature grapes, this may be a good segue to our next wine. Is that in 2011, the Virginia Wine Board designated Viognier as Virginia's official signature grape for marketing purposes. There was a lot of excitement behind Viognier. Our state, a lot of wines in the state made from Viognier were getting a lot of attention. But unfortunately, Viognier is a pretty fickle grape. It tends to be very hard to manage in some vineyards, especially in the humid areas. And so although Viognier was designated as a official signature grape for marketing purposes, that's been overcome by events. So a couple of vintages and Viognier production went down a little bit. And I don't know that a lot of wine growers are as enthusiastic about Viognier as they used to be, because of Petit Manseng is showing so much potential, as well as other grapes like Albarino that may be a little more forgiving to work with in the vineyard. So, but with that being said, that was Virginia's first official signature grape that is now overcome by events.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. So yeah, like you said, our second wine is a Viognier. It is from Anaba. They are in Sonoma County, in the Sonoma Valley. And I chose this wine for us for a few reasons. One is that I don't remember exactly how long ago it was, but you and I had a conversation about this grape, and we talked about how, it can be lovely, but there are often so many really flabby examples of it, particularly in the New World. And I've been a fan of Anaba, and I've for a number of years, and I really enjoy their Viognier. This is from the Landa Vineyard, which sits at the base of the Mayacamas Mountains, and they make a late harvest Viognier as well, and even that is incredibly acid rich and lean, and that's sort of one of the reasons. A couple of the reasons I chose it. Anaba focuses. They do a few things: Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, both appellation and vineyard specific, and then they work with several Rhone varieties, of course, of which this is one. So I'm curious, Frank, what you think of this Viognier.
So first of all, I dig it. I love this sort of leaner style. I think this is what Viognier should be. We've talked about how Viognier can get really flabby very fast, and it just isn't enjoyable to drink. But I dig the stone fruit aromas that are just kind of jumping out of the glass. Viognier is a grape that if it kind of gets on the other side of too ripe, of course, it gets flabby and there's no acid. Is this 100% Viognier? Do they throw a splash of something else in there for a little lift?
This is entirely Viognier.
Wow. Okay. I dig it. I really like it. What I do also like is the ABV 13 or just under 14%, which, it's just, I like the precision of it.
Yeah, I find it, a little flinty. I love the acid. I think that's what one of the things these two wines have in common. They're both low alcohol, like you said, although the Petit Manseng under 13%. By the way, to go back for a second, what's the retail price on the Petit Manseng?
So this one at Early Mountain retails for 32.
Okay, so we're also in the same ballpark there because this Viognier is 36. So
okay.
A lot of interesting comparables between these two wines.
Yeah, and so so you mentioned the ABV of the Petit Manseng is 12.8, and that's one of the challenges with Petit Manseng like Viognier is managing the balance, right? Because the acidity in Petit Manseng can get crazy, but so can the sugars. So just getting the balance right is it's an art and maybe a science in some cases.
Indeed.
Brother, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful Viognier. I've got a peach burrata salad that I'm going to pair this with. I throw in some endive, fresh peaches, burrata, small slices of green onion, and some basil, olive oil, some sea salt. Man, this is going to be beautiful.
That sounds perfect, like a great match. This is actually, honestly, when I think of my mind's eye of what Viognier should be, stylistically and methodology wise, this is what I'm looking for.
Yep. This is really fantastic. They've dialed in on the balance, finding that perfect balance in Viognier, because it's got great acidity, like you said, and I dig that flintiness. And Virginia, we don't get as much of the flintiness in the Viognier. It's more huge stone fruit, tropical fruits, and this is really fantastic.
Yeah, certainly those examples exist in California where the aromatics are completely over the charts. Kind of like you were hinting, they can be intoxicating. You're like, wow, these great stone fruit aromatics, but then you taste it and there's a flash up front and then they fall flat.
Yeah.
And this one, lingers. And I think that's another thing both of these wines have in common. They both have really solid persistence and finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally agree. These are, I would call both of these, I would give them both a buy.
Excellent.
So, hey, Gabe, now I will say, just if people are watching, the podcast and they do want to buy the wine, I know Early Mountain does ship to many states. Early Mountain Vineyards, I think their website is just earlymountain.com. But what about Anaba? Do they ship outside of California?
They do. They ship outside of California. They've got a good wine club. They're also very engaged on social media, doing Instagram tastings, especially during this time as more people are. And they really, the owner, John Sweezy, is very involved and accessible, out there, selling the wines and the brand. And I think they make quite a number of really delicious wines that if you get a chance to taste this Viognier and you like it, check out some of their other stuff, because I do think that they really are doing a good job across the board.
Cool. And I would echo that for Early Mountain. They've got just, and they've made huge strides in quality. And they've got a couple of red blends, Bordeaux style blends that are just unbelievably delicious and balanced. If I were at Early Mountain, if I were to describe, say, hey, describe Early Mountain wines in one word, balance is it. The Maya Hood White has brought pet nat to, Virginia. So they make a range of pet nats, but they make these beautiful whites like Petit Manseng, and they have a white blend, but man, their red blends are just unbelievable.
Great. Yeah. Anaba also has a couple of blends. They make Turbine White and Turbine Red. They are a wind-powered winery.
Oh,
I believe that as of this year, 100% was the goal as of this year. They're sustainable. And yeah, the Turbine White and the Turbine Red are Rhone blends. And those are sort of, I believe they're entry-level wines, but really, really lovely wines as well. Well, Frank, thank you so much.
sure,
It's
man.
so great to have you here for the first episode. I hope that before too long, we get to clink these in person.
Yeah.